imprisoned some of the men on a boat, which then sank under mysterious circumstances. He had many of the others just shot. When someone said this might be a problem at headquarters, the man of steel reportedly replied, "Death solves all problems. No man, no problem."
For Lenin, Stalin was a real revolutionary. Lenin knew that Trotsky wanted to be real revolutionary. Trotsky wanted to be cruel. Trotsky wanted to be real executor for revolutionary enemies. But Stalin was cruel. Stalin was able to hate really.
In the end, this ruthlessness would turn Lenin away from his protege. But for now, this small band of men would start pulling Russia into their vision of the world. And this world would soon be dominated by a single one of them, Joseph Stalin. Like most young men, Joseph Stalin fell in love and married during his early years. His first wife, Yekaterina Svanidze, died a few years after they were married. Their one child, Yakov, was left with her family. Stalin wouldn't see the boy again until he was a grown man. At the age of 39, Joseph Stalin married again, this time to Nadezhda Alliluyeva, the 17-year-old daughter of two friends from his exile days. They had two children, Svetlana and Vasily. But Stalin's attention was focused on matters of state. The Bolsheviks got rid of the last of the white forces in 1920. Now they would remake Russia as the first communist state. Marx had called religion the opiate of the masses, so the Bolsheviks set out to eliminate it. Churches were desecrated, and priests openly mocked.
I believe the most terrible thing in Bolsheviks' empire that they were atheistic empire. They finished Russian religion, and result was terrible. They stopped to be people. They became crowd, incredible crowd.
Food was scarce since the Bolsheviks had seized every scrap of grain during the war. Where were the food and peace Lenin had promised? This discontent erupted in the naval base of Kronstadt in the Gulf of Finland, when a group of sailors who had fought alongside the Reds in the Civil War began demanding food and political freedom. Trotsky sent in the Red Army and slaughtered the resistors. It was now clear the popular revolution was over. A few thousand Bolsheviks had absolute control of a nation of millions. In 1922, Comrade Stalin was given an important job in this new ruling class, running the party secretariat.
On the one hand, it was just to keep the books. Where were the party members? Who were they? But it also was responsible for appointing people to administrative positions in the party. And like any good ward politician, he appointed people who seemed to be loyal to him, who thought as he thought, and he removed people he didn't like.
His following was growing, but to get more power, he knew he'd have to outmaneuver the party leadership. After Lenin, the most powerful man in the party was Trotsky, who had emerged from the war a popular hero. So in 1923, Stalin formed an anti-Trotsky alliance with fellow Politburo members Kamenev and Zinoviev. Like all his alliances, this one wouldn't last.
It isn't that they really liked him, but they were still taken in by him. It was an extraordinary way in which somehow they all find themselves working with him in 10 years later in the Politburo, and they still haven't understood he's going to kill them.
But Lenin understood. The leader of the revolution had suffered a stroke in 1922. Realizing the end was near, he wrote a secret will of sorts evaluating his men. He finally died in 1924, and this testament was read out loud.
It said Trotsky was the most outstanding man in the Central Committee, but he was too inclined to be an administrator. And Stalin was also a difficult man. And then he would put a PS saying Stalin it is really too bad. He's too rude and crude, and he must be removed from his post.
But Kamenev and Zinoviev stood by their alliance, and Stalin stayed General Secretary. It would be their biggest mistake. In 1926, Stalin allied with the conservatives, including old friend Nikolai Bukharin, to kick Kamenev and Zinoviev out of the Politburo. Soon, his conservative allies were ousted as well. In 1927, he demoted Trotsky from the party and then sent him into exile. Trotsky would never see Russia again. Bukharin said Stalin knows only vengeance, the stab in the back.
The grievous and ultimately fatal mistake of all of Lenin's successors, except Stalin, was they fought among themselves, sometimes allying themselves with Stalin when it suited them, sometimes not. And while these men fought among themselves over matters of principle, one of the great intriguers and political operators of the 20th century, step by step, destroyed all of them.
By the end of the 1920s, Stalin was the unquestioned leader of the Communist Party. He'd now pulled the Russians into his vision of the world, whether they liked it or not. The first step was to collectivize the farming, a cornerstone of Marxism. He had the better-off farmers, known as kulaks, kicked off their land and sent to Siberia. More than 15 million of them were uprooted in the 1930s. The rest of the peasants were then forced onto enormous collective farms. But they didn't go happily. Furious farmers slaughtered